Hello and welcome back everyone. We are finally here with a new Touch Designer tutorial in which we'll be recreating this instancing setup by Bileam. However, we will do so with pops, as you can see in the other little output out there. Initially, I wanted to use this pop network for something else, but after ditching the idea, I didn't know what to do with it. And this is how this video came to be. So I asked Bileam's permission to do so, and it was an instant yes from him. So for today's tutorial, we're gonna analyze how he created his setup years ago, what has changed since then, and how I created my own network. So without further ado, let's get started with today's guide. But before doing so, we have a special surprise for all of you watching this, because this tutorial is my first Touch Designer tutorial to have a sponsor, so let's hear what they have to say. Have you ever wanted to join a Patreon, but with so many choices you never know which one to go for? Well, Bileam's Patreon is offering a 25% discount code for everyone watching this until July 1st. You get to download previous projects, join his Discord server, take part in Patreon meetings, and check what he's currently working on. You can find the discount code to use at checkout in the description, and thanks again to Bileam for sponsoring this video. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's talk about Bileam's system and what has changed since then. So we're gonna take a very quick analysis to what the system looked like back in the days, and I guess we can showcase every node. Doesn't really matter to us. The core system is over here, is relatively simple actually. For all of you who have done a little bit of instancing, you should probably know most of this. We simply have a box who has been scaled down up until 0.05 in size, from a simple box of 1 to 1 to 1. And we also have a grid copied a bunch of time along the z-axis to give us all of the positions, which are then outputted onto a chop, a sub to chop node. And then that same node is used as the second input of a resample chop, which takes a bunch of different noises that will alter different values inside of the instancing setup at the end. Specifically, we have scale X, scale Y, scale Z, and then rotation, which there's only one specifically. The core thing to take here is simply that the rotational noise has an exponent of 0, because this is later gonna get multiplied by 90, meaning that every rotation is either gonna be 0 or 90 degrees on one of the axes. And then over here he's like rearranging simply rearranging the values from like 0 to 1 to -20 to 20, or to 5 to 30, or to 2 to 20, and so on and so forth. Then for the rest of it, he simply puts his camera at position 20, 20, 20, and then has it look at a null comp, and then he just places a light in another position, which we don't really care because our system is going to look a little bit different. Another thing to say, by the way, is that this is not going to be, again, a one-to-one copy of Bileam's system. Is more about understanding how the system works, and then I'm going to create my own copy. If you wish to create an identical copy of Bileam's system with our pop network, you can just alter the pop network once we're finished to get a lot closer to this. He also adds a little bit of this film grain kind of thingy as an overlay, I believe. It's just added on top, but we're not really gonna be doing that. In my case, I just have a simpler, cleaner kind of look. I prefer that. A little bit of an extra thing that I thought was a kind of a cool idea actually is the fact that the rotation only happens on the y-axis, and that the color is actually derived by the rotation channel. One thing that some of you may have noticed is that this system is entirely instanced on chops. And for those of you who haven't done Touch Designer for a long time, this may seem weird, but this actually makes perfect sense due to when this video was released, which was roughly 6 years ago. And back then, top instancing just didn't exist. It just wasn't a thing. I wish I was kidding, but like it didn't exist. Then it was added, I think, a few months, maybe a year after that video release. I do remember it because a few videos after that, he did came up with another video where he started exploring top instancing, because again, it just did not exist back then. But a curious thing to say about it is that back then, when you did instancing via chop, or sometimes you would do it via dance, you had this thing where you would send a null node, or whatever your last node was, usually it should be a null, into the default instance op, and then simply get the individual channels for the different properties such as tx, ty, rotation, scale, and whatnot. And if you've done instancing with pobs, I'm not talking about copying with pobs, which is also, by the way, what we're going to do. We're not going to do instancing, but if you do instancing with pobs, the best solution is actually, again, to use this default instance op, just send a null over here and then get the different attributes each time for the different properties, which is something that you couldn't really do when we were stuck in the top instancing era. So yeah, this is basically the entire system behind Bileam's solution from a few years back. So we can now go and explore what I did here. I actually have two copies over here, and I gotta keep in check on which one I have, because one I'm just gonna like slowly copy. So this one is the one I'm copying, and this one is the one we already have. So as you can see, it's still a very not particularly complicated system. It has just a few nodes in, and yeah, we're gonna go and recreate this in a second now. So hold up a minute. All right, so I went and deleted everything. The only things I have kept are this out top and the render top set to default. Then we have an LFO set into pulse with a frequency of 0.25, renamed it to rand just because I felt like it, and because that's also the name I used before, and also have our own little null over here, which we are going to use to trigger a bunch of different other nodes. So before we go and check a little bit further into what these are for, let's get started by creating our grid. And thankfully that's like the easiest part. Actually, before we keep on going, if you see me looking up and down every now and then, it's because I have a copy of the network on the upper monitor. But yeah, anyway, let's get started with a grid pop. And it doesn't really matter what we do here, as long as we have the right amount of boxes, hopefully not too many, and that we don't have any kind of connectivity. We only want point primitives. That's all we're going to use. We're not going to change any other values other than the amount of points inside our grid. In the original one, I used a 10 by 10 by 10 system. So as we can see, it's now a three-dimensional grid. I also believe to have a little transform over here, which I use for a few different things, but as of right now, we're only going to use it for scaling our grid into a size of 2. And then we have our first randomizing factor. So we do that via attaching a random pop node. And let's see, what do we have here? We have our seed value combined, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the type is going to stay uniform, and the values here is going to go from 0.01 all the way to 10. and the combine operation is going to be set, and we're going to make an attribute scope which is going to be called scale. And I believe that's about it. Then we are going to make another random pop, and in this case we're going to do the exact same thing of setting it into set as a combining operation using a ROT, rotation attribute scope. And this one is going to be slightly different. So in this case, we're going to say that the type is of two values, and the two values, it can either be 0 or 90. So we don't have to do like Bileam did, where he had 0, 1, and then multiplies it. We just do this, and we're going to leave it as that for now. And then finally, I believe we have another random pop, random pop. And in this random pop, we do a thing that is a little bit different. So we set the value a to be 0.01, and then combine operation yet again to set. And then the attribute scope, we're going to call it the same way I called it in my original network, which is fake color. And you're going to see why we're doing this in a second. But before we keep going, I want to recreate the randomizing setup that I had in the original network. So let's see what I have over here. It's our good old friend, the pattern chop, set to, let's see, repeating non-integer, length of 1, seed, I just randomized it, 2.3, why not? And the range goes from 0 to 10,000, apparently. That's what I went with. And I believe I attached the random null over here to the randomizing in the trigger. So each time it gives us a little different number. And then after that, we simply take this, send it into a math rearranges from, and we can just use the value that we have over here. So from the to range 2 all the way to the from range over here. There we go, into 10. So the result is like from range to from 0 to 10,000 to 0 to 10. And then we have a little null. And I believe I'm using this number as the seed of the first random pop. Let me check again. Yes, that is correct. Okay, and then I believe we have the exact same setup for the second one. So we can just copy paste this as is. And then the only thing that we need to change is that the from range in the second math needs to be attached to the second pattern. So we just changed the number over here. And this one, however, goes to the seed of the second random pop. So over to here, which again is the one for the rotations. And then for now, that's about it. However, I'm probably gonna already create another pattern chop that instead of going from 0 to 10,000 is going to go from 0 to 360. And I also want to change the seed over here so that for each of them it is something a little different, and then simply attach a null just like that. All right, so after this, what do we have? Now that we have random tree, we can attach a lookup texture pop. And the lookup texture pop, we have to be careful of what we write over here. So let's see, I have this. So the lookup index attribute can simply be fake color. Then we're not gonna have anything over here, and he's gonna get mad at us because of reasons. We'll get there into a second. But before we do that, I'm gonna make a ramp top. And let's see, did I have anything special over here? I think not. I mean, I just came up with some random color scheme and put this at a resolution of 1000 by 1. And then I simply went and added a few extra keys and just give them the color I felt like giving them. So we went with something like this, something like this, and then something like that. Maybe I'm just coming up with random stuff. You can do whatever you prefer to do here, and maybe another one over here, and that's about it. Doesn't really matter that much. Now we can attach an HSV adjust, and then after that another null, which we are then going to send to the lookup texture top parameter. And let me check, what did I screw up over here? Oh right, I didn't set the attribute scope, which for us is simply going to be color. Anything else he wants? Oh right, it seems I have forgot over here on the random tree to set the size to 1. There we go. Okay, now it makes much more sense. And the other thing I did in my version of this network was simply using this null over here as the U offset over to this side. And all right, that's perfect. That's about it. And we can now finally have a null. And I'm gonna use a math combine for something we're about to do after this. I'm gonna make some extra space over here. And after this math combine that we're not using yet, we will attach a copy. However, we want to do so onto the second input of the copy pop. We also want a box. And this box, let me check again, it should have no normals. Texture coordinate can stay on the vertex. Texture method seems unchanged. Okay, perfect. And then after that, we are going to add a transform pop. This transform pop will set everything to a size of 0.05. And then finally, all of this can go into our copy pop. We can start to see all of our little boxes over here, and we can then add a normal pop. Let's see if the normal pop adds anything else. It needs to be attribute vertex, I believe. Attribute class vertex, sorry. And let's see, does it want anything else? I don't think we do. I mean, if you want, you could set it so that it also compute the tangents. I don't know how needed this is. I don't think that much. And finally, we can send all of this into our geometry. So we finally have our geometry, and might as well set up our camera material and everything else. But as I mentioned before, this is going to be slightly different from what Bileam had, because I just like to do it in a slightly different way. So let me show you how that goes. So what I do in this case is that I have a camera, and then this camera, we're going to change the transformation order from scale rotate translate to scale translate rotate. We're going to set this to a distance of 10, and then we're going to rotate specifically of minus 25 on the X and then 45 on the Y. I believe on this pane there is nothing else. We can just go over to the view, change to orthographic, and I think I had around 6-ish in ortho width. Perfect. And then we can also already pre-set up the lights, I think. So we can do a light over here, and then I'm gonna make a copy of this. The first light is gonna stay, whoops, yeah, sorry. First, we change again the transformation order, and we're gonna move it by -35. And then the second light, I think it's the exact same as the previous one. So we can actually delete, go to light 1, copy paste, but then we changed the RY to the rotation Y to 90. And that's about it. Now finally, we can start addressing the copy pop that we've had so far. So we can go onto the template tab, and we can start using the template rotate, which we don't really see much, of course, because first we need to scale them. Point scale is the default one. We're going to change this to scale. I think I wrote it in lowercase. Perfect. And then I believe the only thing we're missing is on the template attributes to, well, first use template point attributes, and then after we just specify to use the colors. So we already have that going on, and we can also use a Fung material that we're gonna just assign to our geometry. I don't think I've changed anything over here other than lowering the specular. Again, this is already where it starts to be more about your personal taste, not necessarily following one-to-one what I'm doing. And now let's finish the not aesthetic part, but rather like the post render stuff, so we don't have to worry anymore about this. So in my original case, I used a depth top, we give it the render one, and then we change a few things. So pixel format, I'm going to use a 16-bit float R, and then I'm going to change the depth space to be rearranged from camera space and go with the following values. The range from is going to be 0 to 18, and then the range to is going to be -1 to 1. Then we are going to give ourselves a Luma blur. We plug the first input to the render, the second one to the depth, and onto the depth we use a white filter width of something a little higher, like 20, so it creates this little aura over there. We can already plug this into the finalized output. What else did I have? I have a bloom top, it seems. Do I have any particular values that I want to change here? All right, the minimum bloom radius, because I always like it to have at a low value, possibly 0. Sometimes it's a bit too much to have it at 0. But that's about it. Now, for most of you who are watching this, you may be thinking, okay, but I distinctly saw having something else over here to the matte combine, and you did say there was going to be something else to it. You'd be absolutely right. So I am going to go to my palette, but for most of you, you probably don't have this in your palette unless you've customized it yourself. I'm going to use a component called the filter pop, which is available for free on Sarv's Patreon. I'm going to leave a link into the description. So I'm just gonna grab one of these and paste it over here, make myself a little bit extra space, and we can start plugging this all over the place. So in my original network, I believe to have 4 of these. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I named them to already what the properties are going, the attributes that are being affected are going to be. So this one is going to be filter pop P. Then we have the second one being filter pop for scale. Whoops, I was not typing, my bad. and then the third one is for the rotation, and the fourth one was for the color. Perfect. And then on our math combine, let's see, what order do I have them? Okay, it seems like I just plug them in the same order as we see over here. And then we simply grab one attribute per each of them. So for the first one, we're going to use P. Then for the second one, we're going to use scale. For the third one, we're going to use rotate. And then for the fourth one, we're going to use color. And then in the combine, I believe all we need to do is to just re-express these attributes and combine them all at once. So the first one is going to be P. Then we can add 3 more already, and then just do the following, where we use operation A for all of them and simply do what are the next. Well, color, scale, and then rotation. And the interesting thing is that now we can alter these values. So for example, here I had 0.1. To be fair, we're not really using the P attribute here, at least not in this setup. It's mostly a leftover of what I had originally. Then for the second one, as we've said before, we're going to be using the scale attribute. And I selected Gaussian, and I had it at 7.5, it seems. Then for the rotation, we have, again, Gaussian type. With the sigma, I just left it at 2. And then finally with the, whoops, I didn't change that, sorry. This needs to be rotation. And then finally the same with the color. And again, set it as to Gaussian, and in this case I had it at 7.5, and that's about it. Of course, it's not identical to the exact setup you saw me earlier, but that's mostly due to the ramp being kind of randomized. We could have a lot smoother of a gradient instead of this. Let's see, we could do something like this, and then maybe this should be a little bit closer to that. Yeah, that's already a result for sure. And that's pretty much it. Anything else that you want to customize, such as adding the little film grain that Bileam had, or scaling boxes off of the rotation, can be done and achieved inside of this copy pop. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This was to showcase just how easy it can be to recreate these kind of setups from years ago. Again, the original video was from 6 years ago with modern day touch designer, and therefore be able to do it entirely in pops. So yeah, thanks again for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you very, very soon. And do not forget about the code for the discount down in the description. So yeah, thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.